The Crenshaw Mafia Gang, or CMG, is a street gang rooted in Inglewood, California. They emerged in the 1970s and took their name from Crenshaw Boulevard, with their home base being a neighborhood known as the Bottoms. It's a gritty area of two-story apartments and duplexes, a place that has both shaped and been shaped by the gang's influence over the decades. In the 1990s, the Crenshaw Mafia Gang left their mark on the music scene. They backed the rap group Ruthless, which featured well-known names like Lil Hawk and Big Y. Their presence wasn't just confined to music, though. It spilled over into pop culture. Films like Boys in the Hood, The Wood, Straight Outta Compton, and Dope either referenced or were set in the gang's territory, particularly 104th Street in Inglewood. CMG's reach extended beyond California, with a chapter forming in Denver, Colorado. Originally based on the east side, they later spread west. A Latino offshoot, the Deuce 7 Bloods, emerged in 1993 as part of the CMG. However, this group made national headlines in 1997 for a horrific crime, the brutal rape and murder of 14-year-old Brandy Duvall, an act that involved 7 gang members and shocked the community. Over the years, CMG has forged alliances with other gangs, such as the LA-Denver Lane Bloods, with whom they go by Denver Mafias or Mafia Lanes. Their unity even inspired a song, Mafia Lane, performed by Lil Hawk, Lil Laniac 2, and Big Y on the album Bloods and Crips, banging on wax too. They also have ties with groups like the Weirdos Gangster Bloods, the Inglewood Family Gang, and several other blood sets, but they're locked in fierce rivalries with various Crip gangs, including the 102 Raymond Avenue Crips, Osage Legend Crips, and the Imperial Village Crips. The Denver CMG chapter similarly maintains alliances, such as with the Lincoln Park Pirates, but their feud with the Rollin' 30s Crips and the Traitor Crips runs deep. This conflict became so heated that Crip members allegedly burned down the Holly Square shopping center as part of their war. Despite the chaos, CMG holds firm control over their small slice of Inglewood, a neighborhood sitting just beneath the airport. Their grip is maintained through substances, intimidation, and violence. Law enforcement has long alleged that the gang funds their activities through substance sales, money that has even been used to produce rap videos glorifying their lifestyle. The irony is stark. One such video ends with a funeral, a sobering nod to the dangers of the life they portray. Police have struggled for years to curb CMG's hold over the Bottoms. Residents endure harassment, vandalized cars, and even the threat of attack dogs used to intimidate them. Inglewood's district attorney, Gil Garcetti, tried a unique approach to dismantle the gang, securing a court order that limited gang members' activities. Something as small as carrying a pager, a tool often used in substance deals, could lead to an arrest. But CMG members weren't easily intimidated. Many appeared in court without lawyers, yet they knew how to navigate the system. Some even denied their gang affiliations outright. Ultimately, the judge sided with the DA, imposing restrictions to curb their influence. After the ruling, a tour of the neighborhood with Councilman Garland Hardiman, a former police officer, painted a vivid picture of the challenges still faced. Groups of young men lingered on street corners or cruised in old cars, an image far removed from the wealth often associated with the substance trade. One of those men, Bobby Williams, known as Lil Hawk, had Bottomsville tattooed on his neck. He insisted he was no longer involved in gang activity and that the DA had it all wrong. Court documents told a different story. They described CMG as a well-organized operation, almost like a business. At the top sat Kenny Boy Riley, the leader who oversaw substance sales, managed members, and even maintained a record of fallen gang members. Riley himself avoided direct involvement in substance deals, preferring to keep his hands clean and resolve disputes when necessary. Below him was Roy Boss Hog Pete, responsible for supplying the gang with firearms. The gang's influence wasn't just limited to the streets. CMG used substance money to fund rap videos that aired on cable TV, adding a strange glamour to their otherwise violent world. Yet, even amid their infamy, CMG showed a surprising ability to broker peace. They struck an agreement with a rival gang, the Malditos, to avoid further bloodshed. Proof of the discipline and organization that law enforcement finds so challenging to counter. It's clear that dismantling a gang like CMG is no small feat. For the Inglewood Police and DA's office, the challenge is compounded by larger national issues, guns and substances. Opponents of gun control often argue that criminals will find weapons no matter the laws. Yet thousands of gun sales to criminals have been prevented by even the weakest of federal and state regulations. Stronger laws could make a difference. The substance problem runs even deeper. The narcotics flooding neighborhoods like Darby-Dixon don't originate there. They aren't grown in Inglewood or smuggled through LAX. They come from far-off places controlled by powerful people. The street dealers are just the tip of a massive international iceberg. But what does it take to escape gang life? For these teens, it wasn't enough to save them. It was a heartbreaking Sunday night when two gunmen opened fire on a group of teenagers in Inglewood, killing 2 and injuring 3 others. The tragedy struck just a week after another 17-year-old Norman Smith was killed in a gang-related shooting. He had recently left a local gang, the Inglewood Tres Demon Locos. The latest attack unfolded on Crenshaw Boulevard. A car with its lights off pulled up to the group, and over 20 shots were fired. Eric Malone, a current Morningside High School student, and Edgar Cole, a former student, were killed. Both boys had been working with school officials to stay out of gangs. 2 others were injured but were expected to recover. Witnesses said the shooting appeared to be planned, with the gunman intending to kill everyone in the group. While police had not officially confirmed the shooting as gang-related, friends of the victims and local gang members believed otherwise. They suspected the victims were associated with the Crenshaw Mafia, a Bloods gang, and that a rival Crip gang might have been responsible. A gang member who knew the victims spoke about the violence, saying, "It was the Crips. If we find out who did it, we'll get revenge." These kids were innocent. The tragedy left the community in shock. LaRonda Sims, a local teenager, described the aftermath of the shooting. She saw 2 boys lying on the ground, one moaning, the other unconscious. She said everyone at Morningside High was heartbroken and struggling to cope. She also shared that the group of teens often hung out on the street, flashing gang signs at passing cars. In gang territory, even the smallest mistake can have deadly consequences, and Christopher Florence learned that the hard way. It was September 27, 2001, when 21-year-old Christopher Florence found himself lost in the wrong neighborhood. He was driving near 104th Street and Crenshaw Boulevard, trying to meet someone, but a wrong turn landed him in an area controlled by the Crenshaw Mafia, a Bloods gang. Out of nowhere, gunfire erupted. Christopher was shot as he tried to escape, but lost control of his car and crashed. He didn't survive. Later, police found his car riddled with bullet holes. 2 days after Christopher's death, his grieving family decided to confront the gang members in the area where he was killed. Tensions ran high, but nothing came of it. That evening, the Florence family gathered at their house to mourn. Among the mourners was Michael Florence, Christopher's brother. During the gathering, Michael got a call from a woman named Nicole, claiming she had information about the shooting. Hoping for answers, Michael, his brothers Tori and Brian, and their friend Floyd Watson headed out to grab food and meet Nicole. As they drove near 104th Street and South Van Ness Avenue, they realized a burgundy Ford Contour was following them. Inside the car was Craig Armstrong, a known Crenshaw Mafia member. He leaned out the window, shouting at them before pulling out a gun and opening fire. Bullets shattered the night as Armstrong fired multiple shots at their car. Michael was hit in the head and Tori was struck in the neck. Chaos erupted as Brian grabbed the wheel, desperately trying to get them to safety. He eventually pulled over to call for help. When police arrived, the scene was grim. Michael was unresponsive and Tori was lying on the ground. Tori managed to tell the officers that the shooters were Crenshaw Mafia members and mentioned a woman named Randy. Brian also gave a description of the shooter, a light-skinned black man in a red sweatshirt, firing from a red Ford with 3 women inside. The police started connecting the dots, suspecting Craig Armstrong. Earlier that day, he had been involved in an incident at a 7-Eleven. Surveillance footage showed him punching a man after asking where he was from. It didn't take long for Brian and Watson to identify Armstrong in a photo lineup as the shooter. Adding to the evidence, Armstrong himself confessed to a woman named Tiska Webster. He told her he was the one who shot at the Mustang, explaining that he had asked the people in the car where they were from before opening fire. Tragically, both Michael and Tori died from their injuries. Investigators found no evidence that anyone in the Florence brothers' car had fired back. 2 days after the shooting, Police were surveilling Armstrong's house when they spotted him in a red Ford Contour. He was arrested on the spot. A search of his house turned up a red Johnny Blaze sweatshirt matching the witness's description. Meanwhile, Armstrong's brother Darren was also stopped by police. They found a loaded 9mm gun in his car. Ballistics testing confirmed it was the weapon used in both shootings. By May 2002, the case had escalated. Armstrong's ex-girlfriend, Tiska Webster, had entered witness protection. She was 7 months pregnant and staying in a hotel with her 3-year-old daughter. The police had given her a card with the address of her next safe house, but trouble was brewing. On May 1st, someone knocked on Webster's hotel door. When she opened it, 4 people, including Darren Armstrong, forced their way in. They shoved Webster onto the bed and began interrogating her about money she had supposedly promised Craig Armstrong. The situation turned violent. Darren hit her with a gun when she denied snitching, and the others dragged her daughter into the bathroom. The brutality escalated. They put a pillowcase over her head and beat her. At one point, Darren took a phone call, and Webster recognized Craig Armstrong's voice on the other end. He accused her of not sending him money while demanding answers about why she was in witness protection. Webster promised to send him money if he called off his friends, but the beating continued. They whipped her with a phone cord, burned her, and threatened her family before leaving with her belongings. From her hospital bed, Webster told police everything. She revealed that Craig Armstrong had admitted to killing all 3 Florence brothers. Investigators later found some of her stolen belongings in Darren Armstrong's room, along with a receipt in Craig Armstrong's jail cell, one that had the address of her new safe house. Detective Kerry Tripp, an expert on gangs, took the stand and painted a vivid picture of the Crenshaw Mafia gangsters, one of the largest gangs in Inglewood. He explained how gang culture worked. Members often challenged each other with hard stares or by asking, "Where are you from?" A simple question, but in their world, it could spark deadly violence. He also shared a key detail. When gang members see a car driving the wrong way on a one-way street, they usually assume it's either a rival or the police. But there was one important fact that set this case apart. None of the Florence brothers were involved in gangs. Brenda Florence, their mother, made it clear. Her sons had nothing to do with gang life or criminal activity. When it came time for Craig Armstrong to testify, he admitted some things but denied others. Yes, he was a member of the Crenshaw Mafia gangsters, but no, he wasn't involved in Christopher Florence's shooting. That night, he claimed, he was at his mom's house in Downey. He also denied talking to Tiska Webster about the crime. However, Armstrong did admit he and his friends had access to a gun hidden in the neighborhood. He claimed he didn't have it with him on the day Christopher was killed. And when it came to the shooting of Michael and Tori Florence, Armstrong told a different story. He said it was self-defense. According to Armstrong, the day after Christopher's death, he saw a car with people pointing guns at him. He believed they were about to shoot, and that's what set everything in motion. When questioned about his interactions with Webster after his arrest, Armstrong admitted he wrote her letters, but he claimed he stopped when she mentioned getting married and starting a family. He denied knowing she was in witness protection or threatening her. He also said his brother had given him Webster's address, but he never wrote to her. In the end, the jury heard all the evidence and made their decision. Craig Armstrong, a member of the Crenshaw Mafia gangsters, was found guilty of 3 murders and 5 attempted murders. He was also convicted of torture. For the 3 murders, the jury sentenced him to death. It turned out Armstrong had been out on bail when he committed these horrific crimes. But the violence didn't end there, and this time the legend Crips are the target. You see, the Crenshaw Mafia Bloods have a fierce rivalry with the legend Crips, one of the few Crip sets in Inglewood, a city largely dominated by Bloods. The legend Crips are mostly based in the Arbor Village area of Inglewood. In early 2006, tensions between gangs in South Los Angeles were at an all-time high. The conflict escalated when the legend Crips killed a member of the Crenshaw Mafia Bloods, igniting a thirst for revenge. Dury Garman, along with fellow gang members Eric Bird and Tony Wilson, decided to strike back. They armed themselves, got in a car, and drove through their rival's neighborhood, hunting for a target, but came up empty-handed. Frustrated but still determined, they ventured into a different neighborhood and stopped in front of a house owned by Jeffrey Delton. Delton's home wasn't just a house, it doubled as a barbershop. where locals often gathered to get haircuts and hang out. That night, about 9 people were there, chatting, relaxing, and passing the time. The 3 men drove past the garage once, but then one of them told DeRay to stop. They backed up, parked in front of the house, and in a split second, chaos unfolded. Bird and Wilson opened fire, spraying the garage with bullets. 10, maybe 11 shots before speeding away. When the smoke cleared, one person, Thes Good, lay dead, and 5 others were injured. The witnesses to the shooting painted a horrifying picture. Jeffrey Delton, who had been cutting hair when it happened, described seeing a red Jeep pull up. He spotted a gun in the passenger seat. Then came the rapid bursts of gunfire. Derek Lindsay, who was outside the garage at the time, remembered hearing someone in the car shout, "What's up, blood?" before the shots rang out. He hit the ground for cover, but clearly saw a red Cherokee drive off. Inside the garage, Raymond Williams had been talking with Thes Good about football, of all things. Good was giving him advice about staying out of trouble and focusing on his studies when the shooting started. Good's instincts kicked in. He shielded Williams from the gunfire, but tragically it cost him his life. Williams, too, was hit. Bullets struck his head, arm, and knee. He survived, but at a terrible cost. He lost hearing in one ear, and along with it, his dream of playing football. Then there were Delton's 2 young nephews, Davion Freeman and DeAndre Chapman. Just 14 years old at the time, they had been playing video games when the gunfire erupted. Davion saw someone in the passenger seat firing at the garage. He was shot in the leg and ran into the house to call 911. DeAndre tried to escape but was hit in both legs. Another man, Kevin Bennett, had been waiting for his turn in the barber's chair. When the bullets started flying, he dove behind a car for cover but wasn't fast enough. Shots hit both of his hands, leaving him with permanent injuries. Outside the garage, Julio Serrano was at a nearby bus stop when he heard the shots. He saw a red Jeep Cherokee drive by and stopped briefly before speeding off. Too scared to stare directly at the car, he later told police he thought there were 4 people inside. Though unsure, he eventually picked out DeRay Garman from a photo lineup. The investigation moved quickly. Officer Joshua Niss, responding to reports of a red Jeep Cherokee, found the car later that night near 8th Avenue and 102nd Street. Fingerprints tied the car to Tony Wilson and Marquis Bird, but not to DeRay Garman. Interestingly, Marquis Bird wasn't even considered a suspect. Detectives worked to piece together the gang connections. Detective Kerry Tripp, an expert on gang activity in the area, confirmed that Wilson, Bird, and Garman were all members of the same gang. Another detective, Refugio Garza, interviewed Garman after his arrest. In that interview, Garman pointed to Eric Bird and Tony Wilson as the shooters, even revealing that Bird had used a .44 Magnum to fire into the garage. The case against the 3 men was solid. Witnesses, photo lineups, and the recovered Jeep all told the same story. The jury saw the evidence and didn't hesitate. Eric Bird, known as Tata, and Tony Wilson, called Little Two-Face, were convicted of murder and multiple counts of attempted murder. Their sentences, life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 225 years. DeRay Garman shared their fate. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But if you thought gang violence was confined to LA, wait until you hear about what went down in Denver. David Scott, a 28-year-old from Denver, was sentenced to 30 years in prison for his involvement in 2 murders using guns. After the judge handed down the sentence, Scott was immediately taken into custody. The key to solving the case was a groundbreaking technology called Nibbin, which allowed police to match bullet casings from the crime scenes to the specific gun Scott used. This breakthrough not only tied Scott to these murders, but also raised questions about his possible involvement in other unsolved crimes. Scott was a known member of the Park Hill Crenshaw Mafia Gangster Bloods, a violent gang that thrived on fear and intimidation to control its territory. The gang's activities ranged from substance dealing to robbery and murder, and they had an ongoing feud with rival gangs, particularly the Crips. One deadly encounter took place in 2014 when Scott and other gang members targeted a nightclub where they believed Crips members would be. Armed and ready for confrontation, they waited for the Crips to leave the club. As tensions escalated, Scott shot one of the Crips at close range, triggering a chaotic shootout in the parking lot. Over 30 bullet casings were recovered, and 3 people were injured, in the exchange. Thanks to Nibbin, investigators linked the bullet casings from that night to Scott's gun, solidifying his connection to the crime. Nibbin, a powerful database managed by the ATF, works by creating digital images of spent casings found at crime scenes and matching them to specific firearms. But the nightclub shooting wasn't the end of Scott's violent spree. On November 24, 2014, he and another gang member went on a robbery rampage across Denver, targeting victims in multiple locations. Later that night, Scott met up with other gang members at a motel to plan further crimes. After the meeting, Scott dropped one of the men off, only to follow and shoot him dead moments later. 2 bullet casings recovered from that murder also matched the same gun used in the nightclub shooting. The case was prosecuted by U.S. Attorney Jason Dunn, who emphasized the severity of Scott's actions. Scott deserves every day of his 30-year sentence. He showed no respect for human life. Thanks to the ATF and local police, we were able to bring justice to the victims, Dunn stated. Appreciate you watching. If you liked it, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more.